Good evening, my dear brothers and sisters. I am very happy to welcome you all for an interesting webinar on long and post-COVID, what is new. And we are also very proud. Even this COVID becomes very popular with all webinars, WhatsApp. In February 2020, we started about COVID, A to ABCD of COVID with Dr. Suresh as the speaker in a WhatsApp CME. And we had part 1, part 2, part 3. And after that only, everybody now started webinar. So we are very happy that we only first started this information and knowledge sharing on COVID. That time itself, Suresh was saying, it will not be over and we may have part 5, part 6 like that. Now, so many webinars have come and everywhere now COVID. The long and post-COVID, there are a lot of terminology now used in the so-called COVIDology, and COVID has got so many confusing and unpredictable issues. So today we have chosen this topic and we have the speaker, Dr. Suresh Kumar, who is the Senior Consultant, Infectious Disease, Apollo Hospital. And our pulmonologist panelist, Dr. V.R. Pattabhiraman, Royal Care Super Specialty Hospital, Coimbatore. And along with Pattabi, we also got Dr. Professor Ashutosh Biswas. He is the Professor of Medicine and Infectious Diseases, Department of Medicine, AIIMS, New Delhi. In fact, they have started post-COVID ward and they are getting so many interesting presentations of post-COVID. It is only interesting for clinicians to learn, but it is not interesting for the patient. So many complications, so many post-COVID problems. So I thought, why not we select this topic? So we must know what is post-COVID, what is long COVID, what is chronic COVID. So all those details, I think Professor Suresh Kumar will talk, and then the panelist, expert panelist, Ashutosh Biswas and Pattabi will answer. And you know, now in every webinar, we are introducing a small interesting quiz program. Many of you know because we do this Kahoot play game quiz program after every Chennai Pen slide. So now after Suresh's program, we will do this Kahoot. Those of you who are new, please go to the Play Store and then Kahoot, you log in Kahoot, and we will give you the pin and pin number, code number after the main talk is over. There will be 15 questions now today, and each question we have 30 seconds to answer. Whoever answers first within 30 seconds, they'll get more marks, just for fun and for interesting learning. Kahoot.it. So you can type it in the laptop or you can go in the mobile and see this. So that is not now, after the Suresh talk. Now with this, I have great pleasure in welcoming Dr. Suresh to share his slides and to present the COVID, post-COVID, what is new. Over to Suresh.
Yes, sir. 1 second, I'll start my slide sharing there.
Yeah.
I think my slides are now visible to everyone.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Good evening, one and all. I sincerely thank Dr. Muruganathan as well as ACP India chapter for giving this wonderful opportunity. As Sir rightly pointed out, we are coming back after a long time there. We started first, and even for post-COVID or long COVID, we are thinking there. In fact, I searched the Google there. So far, a couple of meetings only happened in UK, I can put it there. UK is leading in long COVID management strategy compared to the US there. They just conducted a webinar, but there is no presentations as it is. They discuss with a lot of panelists there, and panel discussions happen in September 3rd and 4th there. So again, ACP India chapter is leading to discuss about not only the COVID, long COVID also. I sincerely thank my co-panelists as well as co-chairpersons for this wonderful session there. With this introductions, I'll just start. Long COVID or chronic COVID or post-COVID, a lot of confusion is happening now with COVID now. My disclosures, I'm not in a Zoom dress today. I'm in a full dress only there. That's my disclosure there. So anytime I can stand and I can answer your questions also. As Sarah rightly pointed out, we started discussing, this is a slide I prepared on January 12th. The epidemic started, our pandemic started on December 31st. I got a small startup group called Best of ID. It started educating to the people from January 12th onwards. This is a slide I put in on January 12th, whether which country is going to affected with the COVID. Subsequently, we had a lot of discussions in ACP chapter in February end and March also there. It went up to 3-4 sessions there. Then finally, we had subsequent sessions also there. The pain threshold is going not only for Anthony Fauci, every person dealing with COVID, the pain threshold is going up. Why? Lot of literature confusion there. Whenever some material come up in some leading journal, immediately some other journal is opposing it there. It is not effective. It is not going to be useful. This is the literature is coming up. That's why even though we are entering 10th month of COVID in October, but still the knowledge is not fully evolved to me there. That's the most important thing. So this is a chapter guidelines. I just put a India chapter guidelines there. We discussed this in the month of February. I remember there. Still the guidelines is not changed. I put this guidelines. I divided the patients into 3 categories, category A, B, C, even in the month of February. Now everybody start discussing same thing there, category A, category B, category C again. And category A, that time we use hydroxychloroquine, but now hydroxychloroquine is down, but it's not out. Even recent one Belgium publication shows hydroxychloroquine, if started little early, if the low doses, it may work. That's what hydroxychloroquine, latest information there. And I mentioned about remdesivir. I just put the number GS3 5734, but that time it doesn't have name. But remdesivir start using a lot of things there. And favipiravir, that time I mentioned about it there. And in the presence of category C, I told that time itself steroids, tocilizumab. These are the things I am telling it that time itself there. So the guidelines is not changed much. The guidelines is not changed much till the time. This is most important thing. Okay. I want to include this as one of the questions there, but Sam doesn't want to include this one. How many of you got COVID already? There's no need to mention anything there. So you just go ahead and tell, because a lot of physicians and consultant physicians and consultant surgeons all practicing doctors has got COVID. I just want the curiosity, how many of you got COVID there? Yes, by PCR positive. But a lot of time people are not doing the PCR. Nowadays, we are doing only CT scan to think whether we got COVID or not. My chairperson can enlighten this one. So no PCR antibody test, imaging, everything was negative. Maybe the CT suggested or some antibody suggested of COVID there. I do not know, not tested. Don't want to reveal. Please go ahead and put it there. I think my internet connection is unstable. It's coming now. It's okay there. Transiently, my internet connections went away there. Okay, fine. So I'll start with the case here now. This is a 59-year-old male. Basically, he's an ENT surgeon. Now he's got fever, cough, and he claims shortness of breath. When he says he's walking for a 6-minute walk test, he started developing shortness of breath. The history goes like this. Fever, body pain, 16 days back on August. That time he was evaluated, diagnosed COVID. Since he's a diabetic, even though he does not have shortness of breath, his saturation was normal. He was made a diagnosis of COVID, mild, but category B1 since the diabetic status. There is no oxygen requirement. Admitted in the same hospital where he's practicing there, not in our hospital, same hospital in Chennai, treated with methylprednisolone, 40 milligram BD, then remdesivir along with low molecular weight heparin. Next day onwards, they made a diagnosis and they started treating with 5 days there. Discharged with dexamethasone 4 milligram till 10th of September. He started developing fever again in the 15th of September. This time he claimed shortness of breath. Can you call this ENT surgeon suffering from acute COVID, long COVID, subacute COVID, COVID sequelae? Check the PCR again. They didn't check the PCR at the time of discharge on 10th of September. Based upon the CDC new criteria, 10 days is over. Last 3 days, he was not asymptomatic. They sent him home on 6th of September. He remained asymptomatic till 10th of September. Please, participants can go ahead and put in the chat column. I would like to see your response, whether the person has got acute COVID, long COVID, subacute COVID, there is no entity at all, or sequelae of COVID, or sequelae of steroid, I do not know. So my objective is, what do you mean by long COVID, or post-COVID, or chronic COVID? How common is it? Common scenarios. I'll show management way and way forward. There is no appropriate management for most of the thing there. So the definition, this is one of the beautiful paper. At least try to define, because there is no universal consensus to define whatever term we are describing, long COVID and chronic COVID. What is the difference between long COVID and post-COVID? This was Dr. Muruganathan was keep on asking me, what is the difference? Even this paper does not give the differences between long COVID and post-COVID. They call long COVID as post-acute COVID there. But for me, what is the difference between long COVID and post-COVID? When the symptoms persisting for quite some time, there is no gap. The person suffered for example, this ENT surgeon developed fever on 31st of August. If the fever remains throughout the course, lasting for 3 weeks, completely recovered and asymptomatic for 2 to 4 weeks, again he started developing some symptoms that may be post-COVID. So how to differentiate long and post-COVID? In long COVID, most of the time, the person's symptom can persist, either fever or other manifestations. For example, cough, sore throat, lack of one symptom can remain persist for quite some time. Usually more than 3 weeks is called long COVID, and 12 weeks also. For example, particularly the person has got respiratory involvement, the shortness of breath, the oxygen demand and shortness of breath keep on remaining for almost 12 weeks also there. This is because the person has got significant involvement of the lung. The person's oxygen remain for next three months. That is called chronic COVID. But in post-COVID, the person is completely recovered. The fever subsided. All of the symptoms what he manifested initially completely subsided for minimum 2 to 4 weeks. Then again, the person start developing some symptom or some new onset of unrelated event. Maybe possibly it is related to the COVID, that's called post-COVID. But this discrimination is not clear. This paper only try to address this one. So a lot of work need to be done, how to define. But what in clinical practice I'm saying, patients who recovered from COVID, they keep on complaining some symptoms. So that is called long COVID. And some people completely recovered, but 1 month later, 2 months later, again admitted for related event. For example, myocardial infarctions. Maybe it is due to the COVID related thing. People are asking, I'm going to put on slide, on case study here now, they're asking about it. Since many people are not tested, people always want to know, particularly physicians, they want to know, they like to know, I have not tested for PCR, or my PCR was negative. Can I call this a long COVID? The way is we need to do the serological testing. Even though we are initial part, we have not done the COVID PCR. Subsequently, the COVID IgG may positive. We assume the person has got COVID 2 to 3 weeks back. And the symptoms, what he claims after 3 weeks or 4 weeks, may be due to the long COVID symptoms. So we need to remember, don't think PCR positivity is a criteria. So this paper gives clear-cut guidelines, but again, there is no consensus for these definitions. But for practical purposes, in long COVID, the symptom will remain, not completely disappear. From the date of onset, some symptom may disappear, but the person may have some symptoms. In chronic COVID, the duration may be a little longer. The symptoms are still persisting there. In post-COVID, the person has completely recovered, again started developing some manifestations. If you go through the presentations, I'll show some of the cases, you can appreciate what is long COVID and what is post-COVID there. So this is one of the simple slides explaining there. If you see on the left-hand side there, a lot of black images I put. Black images mean the person is in the community. In the community, some people, the yellow one is asymptomatic COVID infection. He got the infections and he transmit to the other people there. So the asymptomatic infections transmit to the other person. The red one is asymptomatic infections. After the person symptomatic, either the person can go home quarantine or the person can go to the hospital. There are two ways there. Either home quarantine or hospital. After going to the home or after going to the hospital, the person recovery. There is no mention about post-COVID. There is no mention about the long COVID in this picture. They're telling people in the community, they got exposed to some COVID positive patients or asymptomatic patients, got the COVID, they become asymptomatic or they become symptomatic. With the symptoms, they can go to the hospital or home quarantine or home isolations. Then they recover or the person will die. This is what the natural history here shows, but there is no mention about the long COVID. There is a clear-cut missing link. What happened to this post-discharge. There is no mention about it there. If you see, this is a natural disease course. Either the person remained uninfected so far, or the person remained infected and asymptomatic and recovered. Mild disease will be there in the form of some manifestations, systemic manifestations, fever, back pain, some lack of taste, smell, shortness of breath. Our patient has got moderate disease in the form of pneumonia there. Or the person going to the critical care unit with a severe or critical illness. Some people die also. But even in this natural spectrum, if you see, there is no mention about the long COVID and post-COVID or chronic COVID there. So this is a natural history. People are talking about it there. But if you see, as I mentioned earlier, United Kingdom has started recognizing this entity there, long COVID health effects there. We thought about some new guidelines on September 7th. This is new one there. They start recognizing, according to the UK COVID study, if you see 10% of the populations, but what is the difference in US? Almost 35% of the population has got some amount of symptoms. Only 65% of the people recover completely within 14 to 21 days. After 21 days, 35% of the population has got symptom. What is the difference between 10% and 35%? Why is a huge difference? 10% is community-based surveillance survey. This is basically a survey. We created a questionnaire and asked the people who recovered from the COVID whether any symptom is there or not. So huge number of populations. If you screen at least 10% of the populations is telling I got some symptoms. But if you're a single center, hospital-based study, you are doing it, you are seeing so many patients. That's what my experience is there. Since we are doing a single center study, most of the patients after treated, they go home and come back and telling that the symptoms are persisting there. So this is single center, the 10% is a community acquired, community-based study there. So whether the study populations, community-based or hospital-based, decides the prevalence. But people are talking about UK and US. People want to know what Indian status. I do not know because there is no data. Only this thing can show there. He got readmitted again. He suffered COVID, recovered. Again, he got admitted with severe body pain and fatigue. So this is about small case reports we are saying it there. And people who are dealing with COVID, if you ask, yes, people are start telling, we are seeing a lot of patients with this manifestation, that manifestation there. But there is no database. There is no data as far as India is concerned. How many people? Almost all government as well as private care hospital starting post-COVID clinic. That means the incidence of COVID related problem is high in India. I can interpret that way. I tried to search for the literature, but unfortunately there is no data for me there. That's why I put this slide. So when VIP has got COVID and recovered and readmitted, so this is classic case of again, maybe long COVID there. He might have developed symptoms of fatigue and body pain still persisting there. So even though he's recovered from the fever, recovered from the cough and shortness of breath, his body pain and tiredness is still persisting. I hear third time also he went to AIIMS, whether he got admitted, we are not sure about it there. I'll show other cardiologist, urologist case there. Previously, I shown an ENT surgeon. This is a neurology surgeon. He just now messaged me there. I need to answer him. 50-year-old male urologist, severe body pain now, but no fever. He was posted in the government setup. He did COVID duty, even though urologist was posted in the COVID ward in the month of August first week. August first week, he go in the COVID ward. Then within 5 to 7 days, once the COVID duty is over, he got fever and body pain. That time there is no cough, no sore throat, no shortness of breath. He underwent testing. The CT scan CORAD score is 4, but severity is not that much. He did 2 PCRs at that point of time. 2 PCRs were negative. He taken paracetamol alone. Fortunately, he didn't take any so-called antivirals, ivermectin, doxy, azithro, so many things are prescribed, but he didn't take anything there. He was doing well for the last 4 weeks. Again, he planned to join duty there. This time today, he's telling that, Suresh, I got last 2 days severe body pain. He did COVID IgG test. The IgG test is positive there. So what do you call this man is suffering now? You want to do the repeat COVID PCR now or repeat CT test? COVID IgG antibody. Sorry, I revealed the answer. COVID IgG antibody. He did it. It is positive. So whether you want to start dexamethasone, no need to evaluate dengue because IgG is positive, severe body pain. So the person has got COVID suspect-like lesions in the second week of August, recovered completely within 7 to 8 days. Again, with 4 weeks later, he started developing severe body pain fatigue. Like Amit Shah, he is having the same thing there. COVID is a multi-system disease. During acute presentations, we have seen it involve almost all the system from head to toe. It involves everything there. But even post-COVID also the manifestations are similar. The post-COVID manifestations also similar, or long COVID manifestations also similar to acute COVID. But in acute COVID, most of the time, systemic diseases like fever, body pain, joint pain, lack of taste, lack of smell, sore throat, shortness of breath will be there. But during post-COVID, what is the common manifestations? What is the common manifestations of long COVID? If you see the long COVID manifestation also, it involved head to toe again there. It involved, for example, people start complaining blurring of vision. A lot of papers is coming up now and WhatsApp messages start circulating about blurring of visions, decreased vision there they're talking about. And similarly, the lack of smell still keep persisting there. Lack of taste and lack of smell still persisting. They are not absolutely normal. And a lot of post-COVID myocardial infarction. That is a big Pandora box I am opening now. And similarly, myocarditis, pericarditis, pericardial effusions, everything happening in the heart side there. Brain, similarly, not only this lack of smell and lack of taste, people start developing other Guillain-Barré-like manifestations. Guillain-Barré-like manifestations, people are having it there. So from head to toe, not only the COVID manifestations, post-COVID also has similar presentation there. If you see the JAMA paper, what is the most common manifestations post-COVID is fatigue. Compared to any other symptoms, fever, joint pain, sore throat, what is the common presentations? Fatigue is a common presentations. That's why the VIP, what I shown, he also got severe body pain, myalgia. My urologist also got it. If you compare the initial symptoms of COVID with post-COVID, this thing showing post-COVID or long COVID has got more manifestations compared to acute COVID. Acute COVID, the presentations are very few. Maybe we are not asking the people in detail, but once the COVID is over, we start digging more, the person start revealing more manifestations. The manifestations in long COVID is much higher compared to acute COVID. But what tops the long COVID symptom? Fatigue is a common symptom. Similarly, people are having nagging cough, nagging sore throat. This keep on persisting there. Fever is not that common. During acute COVID, fever is more common manifestations. In long COVID, fever disappears, but people start suffering from other manifestations. I shown clearly in this JAMA paper there. This is Anthony Fauci. When asked about this debilitating myalgia or debilitating tiredness and weakness, he told this is one of the most striking feature of the post-COVID there. When he gave the interview to the Medscape, he clearly told this is most challenging. He says this is called myalgic encephalomyelitis and chronic fatigue syndrome. All viral fevers can cause some amount of asthenia, tiredness will be there, weakness will be there. That can last for 2 to 4 weeks. But with COVID, this tiredness and fatigue can go for months. That is a problem with COVID there. I'll show my third case here. 45-year-old male, fortunately is not a doctor there. No comorbids. COVID in June 2020. Treated with remdesivir and dexamethasone. Discharged in last week of June 2020 after a stay of 10 to 15 days there. July 2020, he started developing chest pain, epigastric discomfort. ECG was normal, so proton pump inhibitors were prescribed. The epigastric pain and ECG, the epigastric pain subsided there. In last week of July, again the chest pain persisted. This time the ECG was repeated. It showed Hunter-Wall MI. So within 4 weeks of COVID recovery, he started developing myocardial infarctions. But the problem is he does not have any comorbid. He's not a diabetic. He's not a hypertensive fellow. He's not having dyslipidemia. So there is no major cardiac related risk factors for him. Only COVID is 4 weeks back. Within 4 weeks time, he's developing myocardial infarctions. Can you call this event as called post-COVID? Completely recovered from COVID. No symptoms. He came for 2 follow-up. Only some vague discomfort is still there. After 4th week. So after June last week, he got discharged. July 3rd week he came, 3 weeks absolutely normal. Suddenly he started developing some vague abdominal discomfort and chest pain. In between time, 3 weeks, no symptoms. That's why I'm telling what is post-COVID and long COVID. In long COVID, even during the time of discharge, after the discharge, some amount of cough, weakness, fatigue will be there. But in post-COVID, the person completely recover and start manifesting new manifestations after 3 to 4 weeks there. So can you call this is an incidental MI? That's why I'm saying it's a Pandora box. When I told this one to chairperson there, he was asking, can you tell why COVID? But this man does not have any comorbid. He does not have any risk factor for developing myocardial infarctions. We need cardiac MRI. I'll come back and which people need cardiac MRI, I'll come back and show. Recheck COVID PCR. People want to do immediately during the angiogram, he was admitted. PCR was repeated. Fortunately, the PCR was negative. but antibody was positive. Whether we need to do a biopsy of the myocardium to show whether the person has got direct involvement of the COVID, SARS-CoV in causing this myocardial infarction there. So basically, it's an endothelial cell dysfunctions. Any viral infections or any significant sepsis or infection that lead to endothelial dysfunctions. This endothelial dysfunction can persist for quite some time. That is a risk factor there. If you see COVID and cardiac dysfunctions, how it is related, both are interconnected. Presence of hypertension, presence of cardiac disease increases the risk of COVID. Presence of cardiac hypertension, cardiac disease increases the severity of the COVID there. Similarly, because of the COVID, inflammation that lead to myocardial infarction is possible. Again, myocarditis because of the direct invasion is possible. These are all the interrelation between the cardiac vascular problem and COVID there. But ultimate, what is the reason they're putting it? This is basically an endothelial dysfunctions that provokes it. Maybe the person has got COVID, severe COVID. That time the endothelial dysfunctions happen. It persisted quite some time. That lead to myocardial infarction there. If we see the pathophysiology, that's what they clearly put. Endothelium is the most important thing as far as provoking cardiac event there. Endothelial dysfunction is a major risk factor, pathophysiological mechanism. This is an European Society of Cardiology. They created a good guidelines for the same thing there. I'll come back to our cricket player, Deepak Char. What happened, Deepak Char? He's a 28-year-old Martha. Deepak Char got COVID. When he went to Dubai for to attend this year IPL, he got COVID. He came back, recovered, and immediately he joined back. People are asking whether he can allow to join back there. According to the protocol CSK following, 2 PCR is negative, they allowed. But whether the fitness he regained to do the IPL activity, people are trying to assess it there. But without assessing, people are joining back. That's more important. Other facemen today, if you read the Hindu paper, they're telling his PCR is keep remaining positive, but the person is asymptomatic, is not able to join back. So what should be the fitness? But if you see a lot of patients, what we are seeing nowadays, they start running for marathon. At least they want to train physically. They were running for 10 kilometers and 21 kilometers or half marathon they're running right nowadays. So whether they need to be clear. So this is on young male, recovered from COVID. He got mild manifestations. So now he's asking, doctor, I recovered from COVID. There is no symptom for me. Can I go back and start my running? He used to run for 21 kilometers. He's asking, can I run for a 10 kilometer? That's what he's keep on asking. How soon I can start? Either week's time, month later, 3 months later, when repeated PCR negative, people were worrying because he's running in a group. Whether other people are going to get infected. He keep on asking me there, but I told them there is no need to repeat PCR. Nowadays the guidelines are clear. No need for repeat PCR is required. We need to do echocardiogram. What we are going to suggest for this type of people, fitness freak people are there. They want to restart the fitness program again. What I'm going to suggest for these people there? The Netherlands Society clearly defined what we knew. This is a busy slide, sorry, but depends upon whether the person is asymptomatic or mild symptom or moderate symptom or person went into ICU or not. Then we need to repeat the ECG there. That's a basic criteria there. After ECG and echocardiogram for general population, that's fine. But for people who want to go for fitness program and everything there, cardiac MRI plays a big role there. We need to identify subclinical myocarditis is there or not. Because we need to evaluate this fitness program, then only we need to clear it there. Ideally, 3 months is a time they should start working on cardiac training as well as fitness program. They can start the mild to moderate activity or daily activities, they can restart. But to go back to the previous level, they need to have good cardiac fitness training program. It need to be assessed fully. Ideally, specialists should advise, not only ID doc, cardiologist specialist who test sports cardiology. You need to assess the person there to give fitness this type of individual there. For a regular fitness freak people, we need to do at least ECG, echocardiogram. Sometimes the echo function is normal. For example, COVID related myocarditis, what will happen? The echocardiogram is normal. The ejection fraction is good. The ECG is fine. But if you do the cardiac troponin levels, the cardiac troponin levels will be very high. That indicate the person has got myocarditis there. That is a problem. So don't expect LV function is good, I can clear the person. Always check the biomarkers also there. We need to check the biomarkers, particularly highly specific cardiac troponin. We need to assess the thing. We need to assess the cardiac troponin to look for the myocarditis. Particularly the person want to go for aggressive sports activity or physical activity. We need to keep in mind. But ideal thing, 6 to 12 weeks, the person should not go for any aggressive physical activity or sports activity. That's what people are recommending, because the risk of myocarditis as well as myocardial event can remain for next 6 to 12 weeks there. I'll switch my gears. So I'm going to show other case, 36-year female, no comorbids, COVID in July 2020. Came for follow-up, 6 weeks follow-up later in September. No fever, occasional cough, no weakness, but still she's complaining no smell sensation. Absolutely, her smell is not come back. She has a very good smell perception in the month of June, July. After the COVID, the smell is gone, still it is gone. She keep on wondering, doctor, when it's going to come back. So what are you going to do now? You want to repeat the PCR? Whether the PCR remain positive, that is the reason for her smell is not back. You want to check the antibodies, whether the antibody has produced something there. You want to evaluate for sinusitis to rule out other causes of smell loss. Not only think about COVID there, or you want to refer for ENT surgeon to do a detailed evaluations for his smell loss, or counsel and follow her up. Please go ahead and vote also there. So this person completely recovered, but only not completely recovered. Recovered 90% of the symptoms is gone, or 95% of the symptoms is gone, but one symptom is called smell. So this is classic case of long COVID. If it crosses the October month also, probably the person has got chronic COVID, I can put it there. The person has not completely regained. The smell sensation is gone. The smell sensation is gone, still it is gone. It has not come back. The symptom is persisting from July to till September. That means more than 3 weeks of onset. So the person has got symptoms is persisting. We need to call this person has got long COVID. Even though only one manifestations, it's called long COVID there. It's not completely recovered. Similar what happened to the other person, completely recovered, got admitted 2 weeks later, 4 weeks later with a myocardial infarction. That is called post-COVID. So this is a minute or subtle differences I can put it there, because there is no clear-cut consensus of what is long, what is post. So what should be there? If you see the symptom analogy of neurological manifestations, different presentation is there. Encephalitis will be there, myelitis will be there, and post-ADM is possible there. Guillain-Barré can happen, the thing, and cerebrovascular disease. If you track, it can last for months, not only for the days, not only during the acute COVID, this manifestation may be there. Even when the COVID is over, these manifestations are there. It is not like bright in acute COVID. It is little less bright. That means the chances are less, but still possible there. That's what people are putting it there. So what are all the long COVID manifestations? The long COVID manifestations include, particularly as far as the neurology is concerned, the person has got lack of taste and lack of smell. The manifestations can longer. Apart from the thing, whether central nervous system is also involved, peripheral nervous system is also possible there. So don't think the symptom is going to go away. Sometimes the symptoms can remain for quite some time. That is what we are telling. Long COVID is one of the common entity. We start asking the people. Once we start following up the people, we are going to get more infections like this one. This is other common manifestations. Diabetic, non-smoker, COVID pneumonia, severe pneumonia, I can put it there in July. That's why he received all sorts of treatment. Dexamethasone, remdesivir, and tocilizumab also he received, because his oxygen is not improved with dexamethasone. So people escalated to tocilizumab. Following tocilizumab, his NIV requirement came down, become dependent on the mask. Then at the time of discharge, no oxygen requirement, discharge. After 3 weeks of hospitalizations, 6 weeks follow-up, he came for the thing. Persistent exertional dyspnea. He says, doctor, when I come to your clinic, I park my car outside there, almost 500 to 800 meters. He came to my walking there, and particularly one stair of steps he's climbed to meet in my office. He's telling, doctor, I got shortness of breath. When he came, my secretary did the assessment of the pulse oximeter. It showed 90%, 91% there. At the time of discharge, he went home with 96% on room air with minimal activity. Ideally, we need to do a 6-minute walk test at the time of discharge to check what is his saturation level there. But that time we did a minimal activity because he was recovering from a 3-week illness. His oxygen saturation at room side was 96% with minimal walking. He used to go to the restroom, come back. That type of activities he used to do with normal oxygen levels. But now he's telling my oxygen level is going down whenever I'm exerting there. Exerting of 500 to 800 meters, it exerting one stair of steps, my exerting there. What are you going to do now? You want to start steroid to think about pulmonary fibrosis and prevent it, or you want to assess a pulmonary function test, or you want to do a CT pulmonary angio protocol to look for any pulmonary embolism as a manifestations, or you want to think about invasive fungal infections. Why? He has received tocilizumab. Tocilizumab, the immunosuppressant effect can remain up to 50 days. This is a problem there. That's why there is no clear consensus. Whatever medications we are used for the COVID, that has got long-lasting impact. For example, the steroids can suppress the immune system. It can provoke an invasive fungal infection there. It can provoke a TB also there. Similarly, tocilizumab, it can increases the invasive fungal infections. Of late, lot of publications showing invasive fungus, particularly Aspergillus, is coming out after COVID exposure. Particularly, the immunosuppression is severe. That's why people are not using tocilizumab that much. And now Roche also told the trial that the phase 3 trial, it showed mortality benefit is not obtained with tocilizumab. So people are hesitating now with the tocilizumab. But some of the patients, when the person is going with the high inflammatory markers, high interleukin 6, with a good dose of steroids, good dose of antiviral, the person is deteriorating, we need to consider about tocilizumab, because there is no clear-cut answer when to use tocilizumab. So what are you going to do? Whether you want to find invasive fungus, Aspergillus in this patient, or we need to go for a pulmonary rehabilitations. This person has got classic COVID-associated fibrosis. We need to give rehabilitations, step-down steroids, along with some breathing exercises and other program you want to do. Whether you want to do or not, we need to check. But if you see the person coming back to the hospital, particularly for emergency, what is the reason? The respiratory distress is the reason. It depends upon what immunosuppressions you used when you discharge the patients. At the time of discharge, what is his oxygen saturations, whether he can able to perform a 6-minute walk test at the time of discharge or not. These are all the issues there. So with these issues, we can say which is most common manifestations. But if we see elderly people, a lot of fall happening. Giddiness is one of the common manifestations in elderly there. And we see altered mental status. Again, the people has got some lot of decubitus ulcer, particularly prolonged bedridden status. They develop a lot of skin and soft tissue infection is possible. Chest pain is one of the common manifestations. Don't ignore it there. Chest pain and other vague headaches and body pain, myalgias are still persisting there. So these are all the reasons people are coming back to the emergency. But the leader is again shortness of breath, persisting cough, nagging cough. These are all the common manifestations. So if you see the natural history of pulmonary involvement, 60% of the cases, mild to moderate involvement, parenchymal pulmonary, within 3 weeks they can recover. 40% have residual abnormalities. The ground glass can persist for quite some time. Elderly patients need longer time. Persistent hypoxemia and fibrosis, we need to have a good pulmonary rehabilitation program. But unfortunately, there is no clear-cut guidelines when to do it. European Respiratory Society has suggested something there, but along with American Thoracic Society, they come up with some guidelines what to do the pulmonary involvement assessment there. So the fibrosis is one of the major common manifestations following a significant COVID pneumonia, particularly when the ground glass opacities initially involve more than 50% of the lung volume. The chances of going for a pulmonary fibrosis risk is very high there. And similarly, the pulmonary vascular, because COVID is both vascular as well as inflammatory thing there. The vascular pulmonary hypertension is also one of the common manifestations people are encountering. So both pulmonary fibrosis as well as pulmonary hypertension is one of the common manifestations of the COVID, particularly post-COVID. Or some of the persons has not completely recovered. For example, this man went with 96%, came back again worsening there. Some people, the saturation is 90, 92, even 88, minimal oxygen is required there. So both post-COVID and long COVID, pulmonary manifestation is one of the common manifestation there. If you see this Lancet respiratory disease article, they want to follow the persons for 36 months there. They want to follow for 36 months, 3 years they want to follow. The pulmonary manifestations take long time to recover. Within a month, they want to do on video consultations or in-person consultations, and 3 months they want to do X-ray or CT chest and pulmonary function test. But most of the hospital, they stop doing the pulmonary function test. We need to do the PFT to assess what is the lung capacity there. We need to assess the thing. And significant involvement. At the end of 1 year, If the changes are not improving, if the PFT functions is not showing any improvement, we need to follow the persons for 3 years. That's what this guideline says there. So it's a too long COVID for me there. Not only chronic, it's chronic COVID for me there. And this is another subtle manifestation, skin manifestations. A lot of skin manifestations we are seeing, particularly people exposed to the steroid. Steroid related skin changes is quite common there. Acne like changes is there. Some vesicular lesions we are seeing there. Thinning out of the skin is seeing there. Apart from the thing, this is called telogen effluvium we call there. That means the air is going into the resting phase immediately. Not necessarily because of the COVID. Any stressful conditions can lead to hair loss there. That's one of the more common manifestations. But following post-COVID, either because of the COVID or because of the stress or because of the hospitalizations or because losing one of the family members, they are losing the hair. So this is one of the common manifestations, not common manifestations. If you provoke, if you ask, you can get it there. This is another interesting aspect of the COVID, post-COVID I can call there. 38-year-old female OBG working in Institute of Obstetrics and Gynecology, IGMOR. She presented with fever, body pain, weakness. The CT test was normal. COVID PCR was positive in April 2020, admitted in government setup, treated with hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin. That is a drug they used in April month. Remdesivir was in June, July. So he used hydroxychloroquine, she was used hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, and improved within 2 weeks time. 2 PCRs was negative. Previous guidelines, 2 PCRs should be negative. 2 PCR they did negative. She took long time to join back. In August, she joined back. So almost more than 12 weeks, I can put it now. During this course, she was doing well. No symptoms, no cough, no shortness of breath, nothing. Now after joining back, she started developing fever for the last 5 days. Minimal cough she started developing there. CT this time repeated, but she was not repeated CT that time. Initial manifestation they repeated. At the time of discharge, post-COVID also they didn't follow up. Because April patients who got admitted, most of the patients are lost to follow-up. They think they're okay because this post-COVID, long COVID was not in the mind in the month of April and May there. So she lost to follow-up, came back in August with ground glass opacities and some consolidations. I do not know what is a discharge or immediate follow-up CT there. That's the problem now. COVID IgG is positive. Again, government authorities want to repeat the PCR. They repeated the PCR. PCR is positive. Cycle threshold value is 26. First case has been reported from Bangalore. A lot of WhatsApp messages were circulating a couple of weeks back. Whether we can call it is a Chennai reinfection there. Second case or third case of reinfections in Chennai. Now, a lot of discussing about, lot of cases about this one. What about it? When the person's cycle threshold is less than 33, I can put it there, or less than 30. The person's cycle threshold is less than 33. After quite some time they recovered, we can think about reinfections, particularly the person's completely recovered and new onset symptom. The symptoms is not explainable with other diseases. We can consider the person as reinfected. Now CDC is coming with some criteria there. But before that, we need to understand this one. People want to know, repeat the PCR. They want to repeat the PCR before discharge. They want to repeat the PCR before rejoining the duty. What happened? After 8th day or after 10th day of the onset, most of the time virus is positive, but it is not replicating. That's why the cycle threshold, we are using it there. But off late, even the cycle threshold, people are questioning whether it's really cycle threshold has got value or not. That depends upon the quality of the sample. If the quality of the sample is not good, the cycle threshold may be low. The quality of sample is good, the cycle threshold may be very low. So it depends upon the sample. Lot of limitations for the cycle threshold, but don't always ask for repeat PCR. Previously, we used to do the repeat PCR, but now this is a first case of proven reinfections happened in Hong Kong. This person is completely asymptomatic. See, in the month of April, he was admitted, diagnosed, 2 PCRs were negative, discharged, went home. In the month of May, in the month of August, 135 days after the onset, he was trying to travel. As a part of travel requirement, he did the PCR. Again, it is positive. The cycle threshold value is bit less. They did the genomic analysis and proved that this is a new strain compared to the old strain. Unfortunately, we are not able to do this genomic study as well as viral culture at this point of time there. So this is a first case. Even though this case has been reported, he was absolutely asymptomatic. People are not got panic. But what happened the second case in US, he became symptomatic. More symptomatic in the second episode compared to the first episode there. Within 72 days, it has happened there. So this is the problem. Again, the person was PCR positive, 2 PCR negative, repeatedly develop the symptoms, PCR again positive, the cycle threshold value is less than 33 there. So CDC is working on what is a reinfection definition there. If the time duration is more than 90 days, the time duration is more than 90 days, ideally we need to do the genomic analysis. That is a false proof. Clearly show whether the person is reinfected or not, and we need to have both the strains, initial strain as well as the new infection strain, to see the genomic differences. But what is available to the clinicians? Only the cycle threshold. So between 45 to 90 days, the person developed new onset of symptoms, completely recovered, new symptoms, along with repeat PCR, the PCR showing a cycle threshold value less than 33, along with genomic analysis. If you're able to do it, we can prove it. In the genomic analysis also, it should be a different clade. That is false proof. If the person has got 2 nucleotide difference, for example, the second phase in the US, he got only 2 nucleotide differences is there. If 2 nucleotide differences possible, the person has got less than 2 nucleotide, the chances are very remote. So we need to have symptoms. We need to repeat the PCR. The PCR value should be less than 33. Along with genomic analysis, we can say reinfection is possible or not. Otherwise, a lot of WhatsApp group discussion is going on. I got symptoms, I got this manifestations. Can I call it as a reinfection? But this is a criteria that's coming up now. What is the management strategy? Unfortunately, there is no clear-cut management strategy for most of the thing there. For example, how to manage post-COVID pulmonary fibrosis. What is the clear-cut guidelines? There is no clear-cut guidelines. People are trying tapering steroids. Some people are using anti-fibrotic agents. A lot of things are going on, but there is no clear-cut guidelines. I can put so far the guidelines is mostly FATSA based or individual experience based. There is no meta-analysis. There is no RCT to manage this post-cardiac event there. So what should be the way forward? For example, for even COVID, people want to start remdesivir once the person is hypoxic there. Even if you read the Ames guideline, a lot of people criticizing in our part why they put antiviral for initial part. But this is a value broad. The virus is maximum in the first week. The viral load is maximum. So we need to start an antiviral agents. But what the guideline says, we need to start the viral agents when the person become hypoxic. Hypoxia happens on day 8 to day 10. By the time the viral load goes down, when the viral load goes down, when we want to start antiviral agent. On the other hand, if you start the viral agents little early, it may prevent the cytokine storm in the later part. That's what people are thinking about it. So we need to think differently to tackle this problem. To tackle this problem, first we need to understand the entity of long COVID is there. It is not acute COVID. Definitely the symptoms are persisting. Quite number of populations, provided how much you are following up and how significantly or how sincerely you are following up. That's most important. The paper what I talked initially, the BMJ, it gives a little bit of guidelines, but still it is also not clear. It tells primary care physicians or general practitioners when to refer the patient to the specialist. What are all the things we need to do in post-COVID era? This is what they're telling it up, but there is no clear-cut guidelines has been written up now. So it is a multi-sectorial, multidisciplinary team is needed. People are saying, I started post-COVID clinic there. But we need to have a multidisciplinary, we need to have a separate scale to assess the fatigue, to assess the anxiety, to assess the breathlessness also there. So we need to assess the breathlessness, we need to assess the cardiac involvement. So it is a multidisciplinary team. Most of the people, for me, the commonest manifestations, particularly people stayed in ICU, the commonest manifestation is lack of people keep on there. The anxiety level, the panic levels keep on going. This Guardian paper clearly told this man, even after 6 months, he's suffering there. A lot of people are suffering. So don't think post-COVID or long COVID is not a new, it's not existing, it is existing very much. We need to have a multidisciplinary team to evaluate the person's post-COVID era to assess fully and try to solve the problem based upon whatever limited literature evidences we are having it. That's most important thing. For example, the study has started. Significant UK people come together and started called post-COVID. The people have started post-hospitalizations. They started a consortium. So for me, ACP India chapter is a good initiative we need to start. We need to start taking a lead and form across. We need to come up what is the extent of long COVID, post-COVID manifestations happening among the people, and we need to see that, and we need to ensure it, and we need to create a consortium. We need to follow it up. For example, ISRIC that get a good tool to monitor the patients, how to follow the patients with COVID. They're given a good guidelines there. So we need to come up with some sort of consortium to follow the patients across India. It's not only one center. We need to follow up to share our experiences. I think ACP India chapter can take up initiative and start doing this one. So we need to think laterally. We need to think out of the box. Unless we think out of the box, it's a bit difficult. If we think like other persons, we are not going anywhere. We need to think out what is the problem, what is the solutions. COVID needs thinking, particularly lateral thinking to me there. That's a way forward. We need to think laterally. At the same time, as a coordinations, we need to work together also there. For example, people are using scrub suit. I usually put this one, I put long time back. People are going to the hospital, they're using a scrub. What happens, scrub suit? While removing the scrub suit, whatever scrub you are exposed to the patient, all carry the viruses, whatever I do not know. While removing the scrub, you are bringing the scrub to your face there. What we are telling, we need to do not touch our face. But unfortunately, what is happening here, we are lifting our scrub, bringing the whatever virus particle to the face and inhaling it there. So what is the best thing? Our scrub should have a button. Unfortunately, it is not happening there. So either avoid scrub suit, use your normal shirts, or you can use a scrub with a button in the front. We need to think laterally. This type of lateral thinking is needed. Probably whatever presentations I am doing, it is there in the small startup website there. People want to follow. If I am busy or if I have followed a little rush today, you need to go back and see the slides, and you can have a lot of queries. We try to answer. My panelists may help out in answering a lot of things there. They got very good experiences there. Thanks for the opportunity.
Start video. Hello. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Suresh. I think it was a very good, excellent presentation. It really gives some fear also among people now, but still, I think the panelists will clear all the doubts. Now, before I go to the panelists, we have. Can you stop sharing, Suresh, your slides? Stop sharing. And we'll play the Kahoot. There are 15 questions are there prepared by the panelists. So I will play the questions now, and it will take only 5 minutes. So let us be ready. Those of you who know about Kahoot, I think you would have downloaded the Kahoot app. People who have joined new, please go to your laptop, kahoot.it, and then get the app and be ready. We will now give the questions, 15 questions, each question only 30 seconds, and you can answer. And then after the game, we'll come back to the panelists. We have got a good panelists now today. Ashutosh Biswas from All India Institute of Medical Science, Dr. Pattabhiram. So now I hope you have got the app ready. This is the game pin number 732-5778. 732-5778. Those of you who have not joined, join at www.kahoot.it or with the Kahoot app which you have already. You can join now. The pin number is 732-5778. All my regular viewers, my fans and friends, they have already joined. So far 10 players have joined. Right now, Anil Virmani has also joined. ETS has joined. I think we have got about 220 people logged in now in this. Maybe 50, 60 usually join the game. Please join, it's a fun. Whatever you know about COVID, because I think everybody has got a COVID PhD through WhatsApp, thanks to WhatsApp. So everybody knows about COVID. Even the non-medical people know because of WhatsApp. So we'll just see how much you know about COVID. And then we'll go to the pulmonologist and also Ashutosh Biswas, who is the infection specialist and a professor of medicine, AIIMS, Delhi. So you are really lucky to have those panelists. Of course, our local panelists like Dr. Bommusamy, Dr. Prabhuram, who are also pulmonologists, are there also with us. So we'll have a good panel discussion. I'll give you another 10 seconds for you to join. And then if you don't join, then I will go to the game. Already about 30 to 34 players have joined. So 10 seconds more. Whoever wants to try and enjoy the fun, please join. because we have been doing a hypertension webinar for so many days. So everybody is very well about Kahoot. Dujan Das from Silchar also has joined, and Sandhya. I see all of the, somebody from Jammu, somebody from Srinagar, somebody from Assam, somebody from Delhi. All over India, people are there now. Joined. Albert Duato. So last 2 seconds, we'll go up to 50 plays and then we'll stop. So I'm going to stop in 1 second. Yes. Now 54 watch. We'll stop now. We'll now start the game. Ready? Okay. The quiz program on long and post-COVID. 3, 2, 1. Here is the first question. To call long COVID, how long the symptoms should persist? A, beyond 2 weeks. B, beyond 3 weeks. C, beyond 4 weeks. D, beyond 6 weeks. 19 seconds more. Already 30 people have answered. 14 seconds, 13 seconds, 12 seconds, 11 seconds, 10 seconds more, 9. To call long COVID, how long the symptoms should persist? 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. Very good. 24 have answered correctly. It is beyond 3 weeks. We'll go to the next question. Now let's see who's scored what. Padma Shri has got 937. Manoj is 915. TTS is 875. We'll go to the next question. To call chronic COVID, how long the symptoms should persist? Again, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 12 weeks, 8 weeks. As Suresh was saying, this is a definition which we could get from the BMJ, but not other people are very clear about this. But as far as we know, this is the article from which we have derived the definition. "30 people have answered. Very good. Very nice. Now we'll go to the third question. Now the score is still Padma Shri leading and Manoj is second. Anil Virmani is fourth now. Fifth, Anil Virmani is from Jamshedpur. Yeah, general physician. Yeah, very good academician. He's got now fifth. Let's see whether he's getting second. How common is long COVID? According to UK COVID symptom study, 5%, 7%, 10%, 20%. Suresh was talking about this UK COVID symptom study. How common is it? Very good. 33 has said it is 10%. 33 has answered correctly. Now we'll go to the next question. Scoreboard, Padma Shri still leading. Anil Virmani is now coming to fourth. Very good. Come on, Anil Virmani. I think today you will get number one, I think. Next question. Fourth question. What is the most common symptom that persists after acute COVID-19 infection? Cough, fatigue, headache, lack of smell. Common symptom that persists after acute COVID. Very good. 36 have correctly answered. Fatigue. And now still Padma Shri leading. As I said, Anil Virmani comes to third. Very good. Now we'll go to the fifth question. To confirm reinfection between 45 to 90 days after the first COVID infection, what is the criteria followed by CD? Repeat COVID PCR, repeat PCR plus CT, PCR with genomic analysis, PCR with clinical plus genomic analysis. "22 have answered correctly. Logical, because this involves PCR plus clinical plus genomic analysis. Now the scoreboard, Nandagopal first, Padma Shri second, Anil Urmani third. Now we'll go to the sixth question. What cycle threshold value in RT-PCR help to suspect reinfection? It is less than 24, less than 28, less than 30 or less than 33. Cycle threshold value to suspect reinfection. Cycle threshold value. Very good. Is less than 33. 23 people have answered correctly. Now the scoreboard. Still Padma Shri is leading. Anil Urmani has gone to fourth. Manoj is third. Now post COVID-19, when should athlete restart cardiac training? Athlete should restart cardiac training. Even before 10 seconds, 30 people have answered. Very good. So I could have reduced that timing. Instead of 30 seconds, I would have got 20 seconds. It was better. But 10 seconds more, 37 have answered. 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. Restart cardiac training. So 33 have answered correctly. It is 3 months. Now the Padma Shri is first. Now we'll go to the next question, 8th question. The two most common pulmonary sequelae following COVID-19 infection are ILD, COPD, pulmonary fibrosis, pulmonary vascular disease, or COPD and asthma. Thirty-six people have answered pulmonary fibrosis and pulmonary vascular disease. That is the most common pulmonary sequelae following COVID-19 infection. Scoreboard, Padma Shri, Nandagopal, Kailash. Now, 9th question. Post-discharge 30-day incidence of thrombosis and hemorrhage in COVID patients are 2.5 and 3.7, 10 and 5%, 5 and 10%, 3.7 and 2.5. Incidence of thrombosis post-discharge 30 days and hemorrhagic in COVID patients. Only 9 have answered correctly. It is 2.5 and 3.7. Now, Anil Urmani, as I said, he has gone to first, Padma Shri second. Now, the 10th question. Can hair loss a problem of post-COVID? Yes or no? Very simple. Hair loss. Everybody is interested in hair loss and hair growth. I think all of you will be right now because very, very simple questions we have put. Forty-three have answered correctly and 1 missed. Doesn't matter. So still Anil Urmani leads now. Now the 11th question. Best time to give steroids in a patient with COVID pneumonia is as soon as diagnosis. Fever, malaise and myalgia despite paracetamol. When CRP is more than 100. When a patient becomes hypoxemic. I think you have seen a lot of protocols. I think it should be easy for you. And it comes day in and day out in WhatsApp. Best time to give steroids. In 2020 I have answered when the patient becomes hypoxemic, when COVID pneumonia. The scoreboard, Padma Shri first. Then now we go to the 12th question. Remdesivir, which is the correct statement? Reduces mortality when given hypoxemic patients. is ideal after 14 days of symptom. Is better when used for 5 days. Remdesivir prevents fibrosis. Which is the correct statement of remdesivir? Is better when used for 5 days than 10 days. That's the correct statement. Of course, Nandagopal now leads, Anil Gurmani second. Now, 13th question. Which is the proven medication that prevents post-COVID lung fibrosis? It is piperinoidine, 99-up, N-acetylcysteine, none of the above. Proven medication to prevent post-COVID lung fibrosis. Of course, this we did not deal, but still. None of the above. Scoreboard, Anil Urmani now first, then RKM second, Padma Shri third. Now 14th question. Following are the gadgets that are needed to deliver organ except oxygen with nasal cannula, high flow nasal, non-invasive ventilation, none of the above. Kindly read the question. It's a little tricky question. None of the above, high flow nasal oxygen, oxygen with nasal cannula, non-invasive. Which are needed to deliver oxygen except. It's really a little funny and tricky answer. So I thought, we'll put that also. Sometimes question itself can be a little more tricky. Super. 30 people have answered, none of the above. Correct. Now, Anil Urmani is still leading. RKM Nandagopal. Now, the last question. Let us see who will come first. Last question. Post-COVID disease affects all the organs except lungs, heart, skeletal muscles, kidneys, and brain. None of the above. Again, organs except. Very good. 39 have answered correctly. Let us see who's now first. Anil Gurmani must be first, I think. Third is RKM. Second is Nandagopal. Who's first? Anil Gurmani. I told you he'll win. Very good. Congratulations, Anil Gurmani. He's a general physician. Runner-up, fourth runner-up is Jenu. Now, we'll now leave. We'll go for the panel discussion. So I hope you all enjoyed. Now we'll come to the panelists. First, I'll request Ashutosh Biswas. I'm very happy to introduce Professor Ashutosh Biswas, who is the Professor of Medicine, also specialist in AIIMS, All India Institute of Medical Science. Sir, Suresh Kumar was talking about post-COVID, long COVID, chronic COVID sequelae. Do you agree all this, what Suresh says? Is there any such terminology? Because you only run the post-COVID ward in AIIMS, because you are the first one to start post-COVID. Suresh has, found in some article, and then he came with the definition and all that. Do you think it's good, or it is, something you differ from what he says?
First of all, I would like to congratulate Dr. Suresh for giving an excellent talk. It's really nice and challenging. So it's very also educative to us, all the new area that we are coming to know, and a lot of really area that explored. Dr. Suresh gone through a lot of literature and found it. And then I would also like to thank you for giving me opportunity in this platform as a panelist to share. It is great honor for me. So about this short and long, this long COVID and chronic COVID, these are all really now coming as a very challenging area, because as Dr. Suresh told that about 10% of these people after discharge coming as a bothersome. So they really have a lot of complications. So how to tackle this? And we really, after discharge, we forget them, and we don't have any mechanism to call them up, to have a channel to follow them up this pandemic. So it's really very difficult situation, because every city, lot of hospitals are declared COVID hospital. So whether these people after discharge coming back to the same hospital for follow up, and how to follow up, that's all. We are facing challenging also. We have channelized post-COVID OPD follow up, and we are calling them up, and sometimes physically also you call them up to look what are the problems. So we have experienced, we are running this, and we are running a few projects also, COVID survival. So post-COVID, the people survive, and then what is happening with them? What are the problems? Not only physical problems, there are social problems, stigma, discrimination, how they are also, we are also looking into that, really what facing they are facing in the society when they go back after discharge. So just I would like to share a few things before coming into the clinical aspect, and that the physical aspect, the problem, the short and long-term complications that they have, whether this is really immunologically mediated damage, or really COVID viral post damage effect, or maybe side effect of the disease, of the medicine, the medication that have been given during the COVID care. Because a lot of drugs are given during this 1 or 2 weeks admission and patient going back. So we just we wanted to examine the side effect. Maybe it may last for few weeks. So that may be the problem. And Dr. Suresh has highlighted those things also. People are taking a lot of medicine. So that is one. Second thing, that really the virus may not be there. So why the complications? So why the damage is still, the insult is still going on to the organ? So that we wanted to examine, probably is the immunological mediated post-COVID immune system. So those things are involving organ. So we have some experience. Most of the, before that, I would like to share some very important experience that people that no old age, especially when after discharge, when they really get cured, nobody is taking, the family members refusing, no, no, you have to have a negative test before discharge, and then they are really not welcoming. That is, everybody I think may be facing that one, especially we are facing for the old people. That is one. And even the go back, and so they are facing a lot of problem, people are saying. So that is one issue at the society, and that is, that causing more mental trauma to those people. So mental health is one of the important issue also facing, that how they really gone through during this COVID era, when they recovered and all. Especially when, and we follow them up, what is our experience is about, you know, uh, we have at this moment about 300, 400 people that we followed after 3 months complications. We discharged in 3 months. At 3 months, most of the complication, the commonest is the chronic fatigue syndrome. That's one. People, the commonest complication that we faced, no, I'm not feeling okay, weakness, not like the energy like before. So that's the only, the commonest one. And then we got the mild cough is the another commonest symptom that probably people are having, that the respiratory symptoms that I'd like to say. And then other all are related to probably the comorbid conditions. Those who had a comorbidities, they had really, especially 3 to 5% of the people, those who are hypertension, diabetic and all, had a little bit more problem about the management of the hypertension, and also diabetic glucose control was really also bit tough again. So those things are also part of this management. We found some very interesting cases also, that one patient was having sarcoid, was on treatment, steroid, and within 25 days, he had a rapid pulmonary fibrosis. So he developed quite very extensive, but before that he was not having. So pulmonary fibrosis is one, that rapid one. And we have also got within 3 months, there are about 3 or 4 cases of pulmonary fibrosis cases. So we had, as we do not have, Dr. Suresh rightly said, for the management of pulmonary fibrosis is tough. No, very much, trial going on, but we Parfenadone, we started this at now at this about 3 weeks. We have given this patient doing well, but is not out of danger. So there are many problems we are facing, and 1 or 2 patients we felt the peripheral neuropathy in diabetic. So it was not there. So patients are coming the neuropathy also, that in diabetic mostly got this. So and there we readmitted patient about 10 patients who had a severe, after discharge about 3 to 4 weeks later, severe breathlessness. So readmission was also important issue. How then we had a problem in CAD patient also, those who had already CAD and bypass, angioplasty, and some valvular heart disease also patient, cardiovascular, that was also common. And thrombotic phenomena was also very common. Deep vein thrombosis was also, we admitted few patients about that. So there are many, really, it's a multi-systemic disease, I mean to say, focus on that. And few patients are becoming also serious. We got 2 infections, reinfections, which we are talking about the CT value more than less than 33, and then genomic. We didn't go for a genomic evaluation to see the nucleotides more than 2. So we had a CT value, and then we have a reinfections. Patient was RT-PCR negative, and after 45 days he came with the fever, and then again the RT-PCR was positive. So in that way, and CT value. So this is how we are just coming up with the follow-up cases and OPD experiences. At this moment, I can just give you this short experience in this forum.
Thank you, Professor Ashutosh Biswas. I'll come back to you because we have got about 40-50 questions. We'll try to answer as many as possible. Now I'll go to my friend Patabi, pulmonologist. Patabi, what are your views about post-COVID? What is the commonest thing which you get in post-COVID in your hospital? Unmute, please, unmute.
So our experience has been, from about July we started treating COVID. Initial ones were from the southern part of Tamil Nadu, from Virudhunagar and so on. So our western Tamil Nadu had a COVID significant issue from July. So from July, August, September, we are about 2.5 months. Now I think I should congratulate Dr. Suresh for putting things in perspective. And actually now we can have a diagnosis of what we are also seeing of late, and it kind of puts a name to what we are actually going through. Now we are finding people who are having prolonged problems, but we are having people who had problems, got better, and having the same problem again. Now it's very convenient to actually label it properly and treat them and maybe reassure them better. So a wonderful lecture, Dr. Suresh, and thanks. We have, I mean, maybe it's skewed, but we have a lot of respiratory thing, dyspnea being a thing, and we have significant proportions of patients who had a course which was a hypoxemic course with HDU and ICU, and those people who come out of those are the ones who develop significant, hypoxemia, and they took a long time to get better. They go home and then they come back and they find that both the breathlessness and fatigue, these are the ones that are actually very common, and these are the people who are coming back now. And so we kind of, dialed our pulmonary rehab services. I'm happy program has also got one good, robust pulmonary rehab program going on. As Dr. Suresh suggested, we got a good kind of a pulmonary rehab structure, including everyone, and that is what we are trying to get all these patients into. Our thing is, significant number of people are having pulmonary fibrosis, especially when their stay in the hospital was very eventful in terms of ICU and HDU stay. People who are requiring a long-term oxygenation, HFNC or an NIV, ultimately who make it, and invariably they have, discharge CT showing some their traction bronchiectasis, fibrosis, and so on. Those people continue to have symptoms, and those are the most common people that we are handling at this particular point. Early days, though, we still about 60-65 days from the probable first patient. And so, going by what Dr. Suresh is saying, we have to be gearing ourselves up to some barrage of similar kind of patients, and give them a quality care rather than just shunning them away.
Thank you, Patavi. I think I will go for rapid round questions because there are a lot of questions. Short answers. Is there any treatment for chronic fatigue syndrome? Biswas, Astos, is there any treatment for chronic fatigue syndrome?
There is no specific that really we have to offer here, and just a symptomatic management and nothing specific for that. We don't have any specific drugs to prescribe, but only to see this all. Probably we go for the multivitamins, and sometimes go for a calcium and vitamin D. These are all the supportive management, and myalgia, arthralgia, the painkiller. That's the only. I don't have any specific drug to offer.
So would you like to add anything for chronic fatigue syndrome? You have anything special, Suresh?
Which one, sir? Okay. Our experience even with other viral fever, the post-viral asthenia, what we try, usually sibutramine, the trade name what we use is Archelion, that can give a lot of relief to the people, but there is no specific guidelines how to manage chronic fatigue syndrome. It's a multidisciplinary. We need to have some counseling and stepwise rehabilitations along with multivitamins. In that sibutramine, we have tried a couple of patients where people are showing good responses there.
Okay. When there is asymptomatic patients, COVID PCR negative, still they can infect people? Yes or no?
Yes. The PCR negative has got no value to me there. The person is infected with COVID 2 days before the onset of infections or 2 days before the onset of symptoms, and up to 5 days after they got infections, they are going to transmit. Whether symptomatic or asymptomatic is not having value there. And PCR negative means two possibilities: either COVID is not there or the PCR missed out.
Okay, so that again, that is within the period of 10 days only. Suppose if somebody is got COVID positive, after 10 days, can they be allowed to move? Because, many questions are coming like that. I had COVID positive, 10 days over, I was quarantined, still I should not go out. Can I go out? Do I transmit disease after 10 days of their symptoms?
I have put one slide in the thing there, the timeline of the events, I put it there. During my reinfection discussions, I put one timeline. It clearly mentions after 8th day, the chances of virus getting multiplied is very remote. So when the person is not having any fever without paracetamol and 7 days is over from the onset of illness, they are not going to transmit. So the minimum timeline, 10 days is more than sufficient. There's no need for 14 days. There's no need for 4 weeks there. Within 7 to 10 days, they can definitely come out. They can mingle with other people, provided there is no fever, there is no oxygen requirement.
One Anbalagan has asked, what is the safe SpO2 level before you discharge the patient? Do you do 6-minute test before you discharge the patient, or you just do the SpO2 and send the patient?
I like to hear from a co-panelist, Dr. Patavi, there first, before that I answer it.
First,
Okay.
then Biswas, then you.
Okay, so if the patient has been minimal symptomatic, then we'll wait for not requiring oxygen for a couple of days and then send them to the saturation 95. But if the patient is prolonged and he's on oxygen, we send patient on oxygen also at home. So it is just that a patient, we get stuck at some level in certain patients because the requirement goes up. Those are the patients who, if they can be managed at home, we can even send the patient on oxygen. So discharge criteria cannot be only hypoxemia.
Thank you. Biswas sir, Suresh was talking about remdesivir. What is the ideal time to start remdesivir? Because I and Suresh were talking, you were saying, in the previous protocols that remdesivir should be started when the patient requires oxygen. But we were differing that opinion. What is your opinion? Should we start remdesivir on day one or only on when the patient develops hypoxemia or when they require oxygen or when they require steroids?
Remdesivir is an antiviral drug. So it's going to target the virus. So when the viremia is very high, I think that is the time, or you can, before coming it's high, as a prophylaxis, maybe to prevent the high viral load that is coming future. So as soon as possible, I think if you start it, so that going to be benefited. That is the scientific approach. Now, hypoxia sometimes is not directly to the viremic stage. So we presume that probably the pulmonary infections and pulmonary edema and ARDS is going to high viremia, which is directly correlated sometimes. So that is the indication. We do not do any viral load to see that is really a time to give antiviral drugs. So that's the indirect indication probably. And the fever is not the viremic stage, but this could be due to cytokine release and the defensive mechanism. So that is the one way that really, so it's debatable. So I think if we are targeting, so that early, if the viremic is there, viremia, so we have to see from the day of fever, what is the really ideal time that the viremic stage is very high. After the second day of fever, third day of fever, fifth day of fever, we do not know that. So that's the reason probably we can delay up to hypoxic state, that we are sure about the damage of by the virus.
Patavi, do you have any different view?
Yeah, I'm slightly contrary view. Now there is science and there is data. So there is a science and logic, which Dr. Ashutosh has clearly told. But we look at the data part of it, it's not really, I mean, it's been fairly significantly studied, and I think they've tortured the statistics enough and they couldn't really find where to place remdesivir properly, excepting in one trial which shows that if you have tagged on hypoxemia, it has some role in reduction of symptoms. There is no survival advantage despite that. And again, there is another open label data which came out very recently, which said a 5 days better. So there are 3 arms in it. One is standard care, second thing is 5 days, and third is 10 days of remdesivir. And they looked at a lot of symptom complex and then varied it between 0 to 7, and they found out that if you use 5 days, you will have a better symptom control. If you use it for 10 days, you wouldn't really have a similar symptom. So it's kind of divided, and so we're not really sure as to whether remdesivir has any effect in terms of survival. No effect so far. Probably some trend towards mortality in the initial Act 1 study. That's it. And between 5 and 10, 5 seems to be better than 10. We do not know how to kind of reconcile to that kind of a data. And there is no role, no kind of subgroup that remdesivir actually has an unequivocal thing. So I would really be waiting for a data before really giving a lot of remdesivir. I mean, let's face it, it's costly and it has some hepatic thing also. So we'll have to be a little careful on that.
Suresh, would you like to add any point? Because already there is the two views. What is your view?
There are 2 sides of coins here. Rightly, Dr. Patavi has clearly pointed out the science and evidence so far. What it shows, when the person is moderately hypoxic or mild hypoxic, when you start remdesivir, the person can go home early there. Compared to 15 days, a person can go home 11 days. There is no mortality benefit there, 1. But if you understand the pathophysiology, the viral load is maximum in the first week of illness. And this is an antiviral. But the problem with remdesivir, this is not a potent antiviral there. That's the issue there. If it is a potent antiviral, if it inhibits the virus, there won't be any cytokine storm in the second week there. Unfortunately, the potency, we are doubting it there, whether remdesivir is that potent or not. But if you see the pathophysiology, viral load is maximum in the first week. So we want to start not only diagnosis early, we need to hit hard also there. That's a policy we are following in other bacterial sepsis. We need to hit hard at the same principle, but unfortunately, the randomizations happen in HACT trial as well as other trial. Minimum time to randomize itself is 9 days to 10 days or 11 days there. So it's a bit difficult to understand the effect of remdesivir, but a couple of trials is not starting analyzing little early also there. In the era of Amazon, they're telling it even OPAT therapy can try with remdesivir and see whether the person is really going to do any benefit with remdesivir. We need to assess the effect of remdesivir in mild cases to see whether the person is really benefited. We need to wait and watch.
Okay. What is the role of steroids in preventing post-COVID fibrosis? How long it should be given and dosage, Patavi?
there is no role. I mean, there's no data to say that steroid can prevent fibrosis at this particular point. In fact, as far as fibrosis goes, there is no data that shows that anything can prevent. There are only probable things based on how it works and based on all the pathophysiology and so on. But nothing is translated as of now. So we'll have to take from previous studies. Now, previous studies of previous viruses have given very conflicting data as far as steroid goes. In fact, a meta-analysis in post H1N1 found that steroids are harmful. And in the SARS-1 and MERS, if you give steroids, it says that there is a delay in the viral clearance, and hence it is a problem. And that is the reason why we are extremely edgy towards giving any steroids without a cover of remdesivir in the first week. First week of illness, if you give steroids, there might be a prolongation of viral that stays, taking both the SARS-1 and MERS as this. Whereas here, in all these steroids, in fact, there is a meta-analysis which came out very recently, which showed that the steroid can be either hydrocortisone or a dexamethasone or even methylprednisolone. All these, they have actually shown to have good mortality benefit, sicker the better. Patients on, intubation had a 40-45% improvement, 20% if they are, moderate, and zilch if it is mild. So don't give for mild cases. Moderate to severe cases, you can actually give steroids. So that is all it is. But there is no role for steroid as a preventing fibrosis. Now, we can actually look at the CT and see if there is a GGO, if there are any bronchiolitis obliterans changes. And again, it's an extrapolation, and then using your best clinical judgment that you might find that, okay, I can, take steroids a little a little more than what has been prescribed and see if there is an improvement in CT. But these are very individual decisions, and as a guidelines, I don't think steroid has any role in terms of preventing fibrosis.
Actually, yesterday I had a webinar with one of the Mumbai endocrinologists. In that case, they gave steroids. The patient developed diabetes, and then over the diabetes, they developed fungal infection, and that too fungal infection was mucormycosis. So he had to undergo debridement by the ENT and neurosurgeon. So many problems about steroids, and
yes.
As you rightly said, the double-edged weapon. I think we have a quick round of talks, and then we'll start finalists. Is there any way you can find out this is the person who is going to develop problem when you discharge? Is there any scale or protocol which you can say this is the patient will develop post-COVID problems, or he will be without problem? Any markers or any clinical symptoms you can say?
Usually there is no specific clinical criteria or laboratory criteria to predict who is going to develop post-COVID complications. Most of the post-COVID symptoms or the long COVID symptoms are fatigue, lack of sleep, tiredness, and cough and sore throat. It's very difficult to predict. Only few people are going for a pulmonary related respiratory distress and shortness of breath. That we can predict in the form of CT chest. If the person has got initial as well as subsequent CT is going extensive ground glass opacities, extensive pulmonary lobe involvement is there, the chances of developing breathlessness or the person is going for short of breath is high there. On the other hand, the cardiac event and other thing is very bit difficult to predict because echo may be normal, ECG may be normal, even other markers, biomarkers, everything may be normal. Sometimes the biomarker is very high. The D-dimer at the time of discharge may be very high. But people are telling the D-dimer is not that specific for COVID alone there. And D-dimer has got its own limitations. So it's a bit difficult to predict major complications in the form of either cardiac event or in the form of respiratory distress. It's very difficult. Minor manifestations is very difficult. It varies with the individual threshold to tolerate the symptoms and come and inform us there.
Why I ask this question? For example, somebody has got anosmia. You are discharging him as asymptomatic, only anosmia. Whether that patient with anosmia is more prone to develop problems. So we can caution him. You have got still anosmia, so you may develop problems later on. There is no way you can advise like that, isn't it? Okay.
Right now, I searched for the thing before this presentation. I'm looking for it, but there is no data for the things here. So far, I couldn't come across any data. I like to hear from my co-panelists there. I'm not come across any data.
This is my imagination question. Somebody has got some symptoms. You say you have anosmia, but most likely be careful. You may develop other complications also. In that way, we can,
Usually, I came across initially the person who lack of taste and lack of smell. The chances of going for ventilations or invasive ventilations is a bit less there. That's a good sign people used to tell.
Yeah, initially, yes.
Okay. Now, sir, we'll have three, four questions with Astos. Is there any role for ivermectin? Simple answer.
That, yes, still it is no definitive role. I don't see that they really it is having any direct that very effective antiviral, but it has been shown some papers and some literature showing some effect. So in that way, benefit of doubt it is used, but still the efficacy is doubtful. I could say that.
And there are a lot of nutraceuticals and immune boosting drugs and food have come. Especially in North, they talk what is known Chyawanprash. Do you think Chyawanprash is useful in post-COVID? Chyawanprash, I don't know what it is.
Sir, Chyawanprash, yes, that is also the recommendation. The guideline is appearing also from the ministry, and there's so many other immune boosting drugs are also included. Ashwagandha, Geloy, and there are many others. So many Ayush products are very much effectively posed to boost the immune system. Now I do not know. I have no idea that if I eat these drugs and immediately is going to boost my immunity to kill the virus or to okay, I'm not sure whether this immune. I think, and I'm not immunologist to understand this
Yeah.
immune how really is going to work immediately, but it has got a long probably if you eat healthy. This all medication. So I don't have any randomized trial to satisfy me really how the what molecular the immunological player going to fight the virus to knock down it. So I need to understand more about that. But yes, grossly, if it is really boosting the immunity, then definitely is going to help to fight against the coronavirus.
In fact, the only proven boosting immunity is good sleep. If you have a good sleep,
Yes.
7 to 8 hours,
Yes.
definitely there is good immunity. So I advise all of them, all the patients, all the people, be calm, be cool, sleep well. That too, there is another study between 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. If you have a good sleep, there is a growth hormone secretion that releases IL-12, it seems, and that is good. In the other viral studies, they found out. So I request all my patients to go to sleep early, at least 10 to 11. You should sleep because the growth hormone will be secreted there only. Okay, I think I'll go one round with all of you and then stop it. Is there any role for statin in post-COVID? Statin, yes or no? Statin in post-COVID?
Sir, yes, sometimes those we as a prophylactic, yes. Sometimes some literature says yes to prevent it in older age people, those who are having. So naturally, there are a lot of other comorbidities, cardiovascular disease. Those we are giving this as well. Patient having hypertension, these patients are having, but sometimes yes, there are also detrimental effect is contraindicated some cases. So usually in old people, those who are comorbidities and cardiovascular disease, diabetic hypertension, we are giving unless it is having contraindications.
Do you give aspirin and clopidogrel also for all patients? Because you said one of the complications post-COVID is myocardial infarction. So do you advise aspirin and clopidogrel for all patients above age of 50 who are not diabetic, who are not hypertensive? Still, you would like to give them prophylactic aspirin and clopidogrel to prevent myocardial infarction in a post-COVID case?
Yes, but that really very specific one that we have to equate because there are chances of coronary complications. So I was looking for this trial, lot of trial, but some literature saying yes, those patients who are taking aspirin and clopidogrel could be continued unless there is some contraindications. So those are the papers there.
Okay. Yeah, before I wind up, I would like to have one message from all the panelists. Before that, I request Dr. Prabhuram, Tripur IMA is a pulmonologist, to say a comment, and then I'll go to the panelists. Prabhuram, your comment or your observation or your points.
Yes, sir. Sir, first of all, I'd like to thank Muruganathan sir for giving me an opportunity to share the panel with the allied panelists like Dr. Pattabhiram sir, Ashutosh sir, and Dr. Suresh sir. So basically, the comment which I want to make is we are basically in a place where we don't get to treat more of COVID patients since Coimbatore is nearby. Most of our patients, what we do is we just diagnose the patient and we send there. So, but off late, I'm seeing that our role is most important in a long COVID or a post COVID scenario, because what happens is once the patient is cured from the hospital and they're negative and they think that everything is normal, we can be as normal as possible. But off late, the last 3-4 days itself, I have seen a few cases with person coming with cough, breathlessness. One patient came with thrombosis, and one patient on oral steroids came with pathological fracture yesterday also. So I think our role in a post-COVID or long COVID scenario is very, very important as a family physicians and as a pulmonologist in a not in a tertiary center, in a small town or semi-urban area. So our role is very important in this long COVID and post-COVID scenario. And I'm very, very thankful to Suresh sir for enlightening us and giving a wide range of presentation. Because as pulmonologist, I maybe basically I'm more focused on the pulmonary part, but this is a very big eye opener for me. And I hope whoever has listened to this talk, they will be very much benefited. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Program.
And also one thing about rehabilitation. So rehabilitation for 3 patients of post-COVID at present, we have giving rehabilitation, and one patient is in tele-rehab. So he is in oxygen support. He needs around 5 liters of oxygen. If it goes less than that, he cannot tolerate. So we are giving tele-rehab also for 3 patients on rehab, and one patient has completed 1.5 months and he's doing well. So his 6-month walk distance has improved considerably and is off oxygen also. So rehab also has a very important role in this long COVID and post-COVID pulmonary conditions. Thank you, sir.
Sir, Asu sir, one drive-home message to all the delegates and audience from you.
Yeah, I think that after COVID treatment, we have to be careful about, especially for those who are having comorbid conditions, co-infection and chronic disease. They have to be more careful, because we have seen a lot of also complications still going on as a chronic one. So complications are to be immediately tackled, and they should really contact the doctors for further examinations and proper care and treatment.
Okay, Patabi.
Yes, sir. So, I mean, I'll go to a basic point. I mean, I think there was a wonderful editorial in NEJM, I think in September, which showed about how masks are helping. Masks are variolization of COVID till we get a vaccine. That's a very good article which says that if you use mask, the universal masking is trying to do what? Variolization. Variolization in those smallpox, when there was no vaccine, they took the blister fluid and then inoculated it and found that the symptoms were less. They got a less symptomatic or asymptomatic smallpox, and so that helped in tiding over the crisis. Similarly, mask is probably not, even if it is not preventing, it is at least making mild symptoms so that all these post-COVID or chronic COVID situations don't arise. So I want everyone, more importantly, the healthcare professionals, because we are seeing, I'm sure Suresh will agree, the wards are full of doctors and doctors' relatives. I want them to kind of take this seriously. It's not that 98% do well and 2% has only the problem, and it's not going to be me. There are problems, there are morbidities, and I think we'll have to take it very seriously.
So mask yourself, that is your message.
Yes.
Okay. Now, Suresh, your message.
Since it's the long COVID sessions, we need to talk about the follow-up, because in the April and May, we have seen a lot of patients there. We discharged them also. Unfortunately, even in the private care sector, I lost to follow-up. So people need to follow up. This disease is not an acute disease to me there. So this is a long-standing disease. So we need to follow minimum 3 to 6 months for most of the patients there. Except few patients, most of the patients need follow-up. So those who had recovered from COVID, don't think you are not dead, but you are not recovered to me there. Please come for follow-up. We need to reassess you there.
Thank you, Suresh. I think let me have the concluding summary. So far, we listened to the panelists. Post-COVID can present with myocardial infarction. The BP may be going up. They may have fungal infection. They may have a neurological problem. They may have myalgia. But common symptom is myalgia. But more than that, the drugs which we are giving also is double-edged weapon. We must be very careful to use steroids or remdesivir. That's why we have got so many experts and protocols are there. We are following it, and we try to reduce the drug-induced problems. And then one of the important point what Suresh said, which I liked it because it was practical. That use here afterwards tell Royal Care people also, TMF Hospital also, AIMS also, don't have T-shirts. You have button shirts, so that you can put like this, and you cannot remove. And very nice, imagination. In one of the film only cinema we saw, when you remove it, the chain has come out and the detective found out. So it's yes, a slack shirt with a button. So that is one good point. Another important point, telemedicine is playing a very, very important role in COVID. So please try to have a telemedicine consultation, because telemedicine also gives you a good assessment of the patients. Then, of course, the last but not the least, I always tell this to everybody, follow women. Patabi is already following women, his wife. So Suresh also follow women. I tell everyone to follow women. That is because women means W, wash your hands. O means observe physical distancing. M means mask yourself. E means exercise, eat good, eat well. And N is no handshaking, no travel. Namaste. Good night. Thank you very much for all your participation. We'll meet again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for the opportunity, sir.
COVID,
Thanks for the opportunity.
yes. The COVID has gone. So that is the time we must meet very happily. Thank you very much.
Okay, sir.
We'll
Thank you.
make sure we'll drive the COVID out of this world. Thank you. Good
Thank you,
night.
sir. Good night. Good night, sir.
Good night, sir.
Thank you.
Good night, sir.